Giving it another minute or two. Okay, very good. So good morning again. I am Marisa Crisocco. I am currently the program director of the UConn TAP, the Technical Assistant for Brownfields program. And the topic of our webinar today is preparing for EPA cleanup grants. So we are going to go through the following topics today. Identify what EPA option or the EPA offers for FY25 in terms of MARC grants. And then we're going to zero in on the cleanup grants. So we're going to evaluate whether a site is eligible and ready for a cleanup grant, identify documents and community engagement plans needed for the application, and then plan for additional training and find resources to prepare the proposal. So let's start with the first part. Okay, now it moved. Which is what are the options, the MARC grant options for FY25. So EPA has already announced that it will offer 3 types of grants this year: assessment, cleanup, and revolving loan fund, or RLF. There will be no multi-purpose grants for FY25. And for the assessment grants, there are 4 types of grants: the state and tribe ones, coalition, community-wide, new and community-wide continuing grants. We just had a webinar on coalition grants last week, so you can watch that recording if you're more interested in assessment grants. Here we're going to focus on the cleanup grants that will be capped at 3 different levels. So there will be 30 awards capped at 500,000, 23 awards at 2 million, and 10 awards 5 million. And these are nationwide. So this tells you something about how competitive these grants are going to be. So if you want to be more competitive, the 500,000 and the $2 million grants are going to be, the most awarded in terms of numbers. Okay, so what is the difference between assessment and cleanup? If you're familiar with that, assessment grants are appropriate if your organization, if you're a town, a regional planning commission, where you have multiple sites that don't have a phase 1, phase 2 assessment. These sites can be owned by you or another entity. They can be privately owned, and you only need an access agreement to conduct the work. And these sites can be in one or multiple target areas, including multiple towns for regional entities. So the idea here is that you go to multiple sites and do site investigations. For a cleanup grant, you are targeting a single site that must fulfill the eligibility criteria. We will go through what those are in detail. You need to have a phase 2 assessment done. You need an assessment on brownfield cleanup alternatives by a consultant. So you need to have a rough idea of what the cleanup plan is going to be. And you also need to have a general idea of what the site reuse plan is. So we'll go now into the details of all the requirements for the cleanup grant. So there is a series of eligibility criteria. For now, I will show you the overview, and then I will have detailed slides in which we will go through all these ABC steps. So you don't have to retain it right now. I will go back to that. But as you're answering these questions, you can kind of like figure out if you're ready for the cleanup grant or not. So the first one is your organization in an eligible entity, right? I mean, can you even apply? So if the answer to that is yes, then you have to think about, does the site fulfill the brownfield definition, per the EPA? If it does, then you have to look into, have any EPA cleanup funds previously been used at that particular site? If the answer, and here you will notice that the answer here is no, so now no is green, so you must be working with a site that has never received cleanup funds before. If it has, then the site is no longer eligible, and then you need to consider another grant. As I mentioned before, I will go back to this. Then you have to consider the ownership status of the site. So if you own it as an entity, as an applicant, then you are eligible for applying. If you don't own it right now, but you have plans to own it by the time that the grant is submitted, then you can still apply for it. If you do not own it, then you cannot. Then you have to consider additional liability concerns, and we'll go into that in detail. If you're not liable for the contamination, then finally, you have to consider a phase 2 report. So you can tell that there are 6 different questions that you need to answer before, your cleanup, you're pursuing a cleanup grant is a go for you. And now we'll go through all of these eligibility criteria in detail. So, are you an eligible entity? What types of entities can apply for a cleanup grant? General purpose unit of local government. This includes counties, which we do not have in New England, but we do have municipalities, cities, towns, local public authorities. You can be a school district, a special district, a council of government, or any other regional government. You can be a land clearance authority if that's applicable in your state, another type of government entity created by state legislature, a regional council, a redevelopment agency. The state itself can apply, a federally recognized India tribe. And you can also be a nonprofit organization, which does include 501c3, but also several other different types. If that's, if you are a nonprofit organization, looking to apply for a cleanup grant, I would advise that you get in touch with us as soon as possible, because we want to make sure that you fulfill the eligibility criteria. I do not want to go into this in too much detail right now. And then finally, a qualified community development entity. And again, you can look into more into that, into the guidelines for details. The next question is fairly straightforward. Is the site a brownfield under EPA? What is a brownfield? It's a property that is the expansion, redevelopment, and reuse of which may be complicated by the presence of or potential presence of substances. This means 2 things: that the site must be underutilized or abandoned, and the site may have had some sort of activity in the past that involved hazardous chemicals or hazardous waste. Now, there are a series of types of facilities that do not fall under the brownfield definition and that they are not eligible for EPA grants. So if the site you're considering is on the national priorities list, if there is an administrative order, court order, or judicial consent decree under CERCLA, if it's a facility that's subject to the jurisdiction or control of the US government, for example, firing range sites or military sites are under that. If the site has a CERCLA removal action, RCRA permits, RCRA corrective actions, land disposal units, PCB subject to TSCA, or has previously received underground storage tanks cleanup funds, then your site is in limbo. Then you require what we call a property-specific determination from the EPA. So in that particular case, the EPA doesn't say no upfront, but they have to go through a series of criteria to determine whether your site can still receive brownfield grants, even though it falls under one of these categories. So if you already know that your site has had a previous RCRA removal, or you have PCBs more than 50 parts per million that are subject to TSCA, now is the time to get in touch with us and the EPA, to talk about the property specific determination. So it's not a no, to start with, but you have to go through the extra steps. If you are not sure if your site, falls under this any of these categories, again, it would be a good idea to kind of like get in touch with us. We can go and kind of like look into different records. Help make sure that this is not the case, because it does happen that people work on grant proposals, spend a lot of time on that, and then we figure out that there's something there that was not taken into account, well enough in advance. Another requirement is, as I mentioned before, that the site has not been cleaned up using EPA cleanup grant money before. And to be very clear here, we are talking about specifically EPA cleanup grants. So if you have received any kinds of state money, any types of like 129A money, revolving loan fund, multi-purpose grants for a particular site, that does not count towards these requirements. So all these other types of grants can be used together with a cleanup grant to clean up a site, but you cannot have two cleanup grants for the same site. Now, how do we define a site? That can be a single parcel or it can be multiple parcels. There are, for example, very large mill sites or other types of old factories that are not only that don't only have one parcel, but they have multiple parcels. How do you define your site is kind of like up to you at the time of submission. And if you are dealing with a large site that has, for example, multiple buildings, then you might want to consider, how you're going to define and present the site in your particular application so that, you can make sure your additional buildings or your additional areas of the site can be eligible to secure more funding in the future so that they can be spread amongst multiple parcels. This is also a relatively kind of like gray area. There's no one definition for it. So if you are dealing with a larger site that may have different areas of cleanup, we do suggest, that you talk to us and Jim Byrne sooner rather than later, so that we make sure you don't kind of like shoot yourself in the foot and you ask for $2 million now, and then next year you realize that you needed to clean up another building and now you cannot do that anymore. Let's go now into the site ownership criteria. So the applicant, whether it is the town or the redevelopment agency, whoever it is, must be the sole owner of the property at the time of the submission of the application. And ownership is defined here as fee simple titled, evidenced by a recorded deed. So we have seen some kind of like other types of agreements that people have used. For example, some 100-year irrevocable lease agreements may be accepted by the EPA through a special review process. I can tell you right now that they're not big fans of that. But if if this is a case where you absolutely cannot be the owner of the site, then you should contact again Jim Byrne at EPA Region 1 now. So everything, you hear me say Jim Byrne again and again. So everything eligibility-wise is under Jim's purview. And this is why we're having this webinar in July. You need to be talking to him now, for any of those situations. The next part is liability. So you own the site, but you need to make sure that you're not actually liable for the contamination under CERCLA. And the image that I have here is a fact sheet. You can Google and download this off of the EPA website. It's called EPA Brownfield Grants, CERCLA Liability and All Appropriate Inquiries. And it gives you details of what I just said, but in a one-page document. So it's a nice kind of like information sheet. So in simple words, CERCLA says that anyone who ever owned or operated the site and anyone involved in transport or disposal of hazardous substances to and from the site is liable for contamination present, unless you can qualify as an innocent landowner, as a contiguous property owner, as a bona fide prospective purchaser, or if you are a government entity that acquired the property through an involuntary transfer or acquisition, or, for example, like a tax, you seized it, through a tax process or through the exercise of eminent domain authority by purchase or condemnation. So in this particular case, you are not liable for the contamination. Part of showing, that you're not liable is also showing that you must conduct all appropriate inquiries, or AAI, before acquiring the property, with the only exception here of the, tax or eminent domain. You must not be affiliated with any person who is potentially liable through a familiar or contractual, corporate, or financial relationship as an entity, and you must comply with all continuing obligation after acquiring the property. So I know that this is a lot of legalese. So if you are, kind of like wondering about being part of this category, we are happy to work with you to figure out if there are any liability issues with what you have done. I do want to go a little bit more into the all appropriate inquiries clause, which is AAI is the process of evaluating a property's environmental conditions, which may be relevant to assessing potential liability for any contamination. And in practice, that means that you need to have an environmental professional conduct or update, if you have an older one, a phase 1 assessment 180 days before the acquisition. So if you didn't update that phase 1 181 days before the acquisition, you are now liable under CERCLA. So that is a very important part to figure out, if you acquired the property, with the exception if you got it through foreclosure, tax foreclosure, or eminent domain. In that case, you are off the hook, by statute. So the next part is, do you have a phase 2 assessment report? And the reason that you need that is that to apply for a cleanup grant, you need a letter from the State Department of Environmental Protection, Conservation, whatever it's called, in your particular state. And that letter must make 2 statements. The first one is related to site enrollment in the voluntary remediation program of your state. So either the state will say that your site is eligible and is currently or will be enrolled in a voluntary remediation program, or if it is not eligible, the letter must explain why that is. The second statement related in the letter is that there is currently sufficient level of characterization for remediation work to begin, or that level of characterization will be reached by June of next year, which is the time that you will receive the cleanup grant. And so your State Department of Environmental Protection contact person, your Brownfields coordinator, will want to have evidence for that level of characterization. So essentially, when you contact them for that letter, they will ask you for a phase 2 report, or an assessment report that shows that people went to the site, got data, you did your soil borings, you did your due diligence, and you had enough data to come up with at least a preliminary cleanup plan. The last part, so that covers all the eligibility criteria. So if you have answered all this question positively and you are ready to get your grant application going, something that you have to think about well in advance are the community notification requirements. So there are 3 main requirements: to have a draft APCA, and I will explain what an abbreviation is and what it means in the next slide. You need to have a community notification ad, and you need to have a public meeting. So let's look into the APCA. This stands for the Analysis of Brownfield Cleanup Alternatives. So this is a document that summarizes information about the site itself and what contamination issues there are, what are the cleanup standards that you need to follow, and the applicable laws. It summarizes what cleanup alternatives you have considered. For example, do nothing, remove soil, tap soil, something like that. And for each alternative considered and what you chose, you include information on how effective that remedy is, whether the applicant is able to implement that, considerations with respect to resilience, cost, and an analysis of the reasonableness of the approach. So essentially, you articulate to the EPA why you chose the particular remedial action plan over other plans. Why is it the best plan that they should give you the money for? And then finally, you will describe what that plan is, have the proposed cleanup. So I want to stress here that the APCA is not the remedial action plan. The APCA is a higher level document. It doesn't contain a lot of details. It talks about what is happening at the site, what contamination there is, and what are overall the remedies that you're going to look at, and how you came up with a high level costs. A remedial action plan contains a lot more detail on how that plan will be implemented. What are the specific technologies? How are you going to, characterize the soil that you're going to remove? So it goes into the nitty-gritty of the APCA. So a RAP is not an APCA, and an APCA is not a RAP. Okay, if you have a RAP, what you can do is talk to your environmental professional, and they will prepare this APCA for you. So this is not a document that you can prepare on your own, but you need to work with your environmental professional to have that document. And they will usually charge you something for it. So it's something that you have to factor into your kind of like preparation process right now. This document must be attached to the proposal, and it must be presented to the community. So this brings us to the community notification ad. So you must publish that ad either in the local newspaper or an equivalent means that you use to communicate to your community. So that may be your website, an email listserv, social media, radio or television, or multiple means of those. So the newspaper and the website are typically the two most frequent types of notification ads that people use. And that ad must state that a copy of the grant application, including the draft APCA, is available for public review and comment. What is the process to view and comment the draft application, where it is located in a physical or a digital print, town hall, library website, and the ad must state the date, the time, and the location of the public meetings. In all of this, you need to consider what your community is like. So if you have, a community with a large non-English speaking population, you should have the documents translated. And you also need to think about accessibility for persons with disabilities. Finally, the last step is the public meeting. So the public meeting can be in person, or it can be also virtual. It can be part of a town hall or other regularly scheduled public meeting. It must be held before the application submittal. And you must demonstrate that it's accessible to persons with disabilities and people with limited English speaking abilities. So for example, you can ask in the public notice, is there any need for translation during the meeting? And then if people reach out to you, then you can say, yes, I have an interpreter present at the meeting. And during that and after that meeting, you must produce for the proposal itself the comments or a summary of the public comments received, the applicant's response to those comments, the meeting notes or a summary of the public meetings, and the meeting sign-in sheet participant list. So all of those are attachments to the proposal itself. So going back to here, think about the timeline that you have to have the notice out 14 calendar days before the application is submitted. And then you have to have the meeting, put together the documents, and submit the proposal. So you need to make sure you give yourself enough time to do that. Otherwise, you may kind of like lose the window that you need, before the deadline. So that's all in terms of like the preparation steps and what you think you have to think about. What we can do for you, we have these are our summer webinar series. There will be recordings of all of those on our website, so you can rewatch those. If you are planning to apply for a cleanup grant, email us right now to talk about all of these things that I mentioned, eligibility criteria, how to prepare, talk to Jim Byrne, and so on. You can also go into our website and see we have a lot of webinars in terms of like the MARC grant support if you want to start writing right now. And this is the typical timeline for the grant cycle. So in September, the guidelines will be released and the RFA will be opened. Typically that happens in the second week of September. The deadline is usually right before Thanksgiving when the grant applications are submitted and they're reviewed by the EPA. Selections are typically announced end of April or beginning of May. And then finally, in June, July, you will go through negotiation, submit your final work plan, and get your grant started. So it will take you roughly a little bit less than a year to get the money so you can do this work. We are providing free reviews and support on grant applications. So typically we have a first round of review in late October, and we return that within 1 week of receiving. And then if you address our comments, you can come back for a second round in early November, or if you missed our first deadline, you can send us your first draft in early November. We'll again turn this around to you within a week, and then often we will do like a final check on your submission to make sure you have everything that you need in mid to late November. And you will get emails from us on all these deadlines in September. What you might want to think about right now is our fall municipal assistance program. So we are currently have a request for proposals open. Applications are due July 15th, so a few days from now. And these are if you want us to provide more detailed grant support. So what we can help you with is we can help you put together, prepare parts of the narrative for the target area description, the site description. We can pull the demographic public health data for you, the community engagement plans. We can also, and multipurpose is not applicable here this year, but we can help you with organizing the public meeting. And then we also provide templates for the grant application and supporting documents and a full review of the grant application as part of the municipal assistance program. So this is really a very robust program. We have had a lot of success with it. And again, the deadline for that is July 15th. This is just a Google form where you will tell us what's your organization, what's your site, who is the contact person. So we're not asking you to provide like a full, it's not like a detailed proposal. It's just a form that says, I'm interested in participating in this. So this is kind of like my last slide, and it essentially tells you that we have had a lot of success with our grants last year. Out of the 32 grants that were awarded for fiscal year 24, we supported 30 grant reviews and our municipal assistance programs, and 25 of those were successful. So our success rate was 78%. The previous year, was similar, around the 80%. So we really put in a lot of time and effort to help you be successful. And so with that, you can find, you can email us if you want to get in touch with us. The best way is to email our general UConn tab email address. Katie monitors that, and she's great about figuring out who needs to talk to you and what it is about. You can follow us on our website and LinkedIn and subscribe to our newsletter. And with that, I will stop and then start taking